The clock on the wall of the salon ticked slowly, each second dragging on as Sarah sat in the chair, her heart pounding. The air smelled of hair products, mixed with the subtle hum of the blow dryers and chatter of salon clients. She glanced nervously at the other customers who were busy being pampered by the professional stylists. Sarah wasn't like them. She was just a teenager, a high schooler who had never quite fit in. She had always been different, and no matter how hard she tried, it seemed she just couldn't bridge the gap between herself and the other girls in her school. They had the right clothes, the perfect hair, and the confidence that Sarah could only dream of. But today was different. Today, she was determined to finally do something for herself. She was going to treat herself to the salon experience she'd always read about in magazines and seen on Instagram. She was going to leave this place feeling like a new person. It was a big step for Sarah. Raised by a single mother in a small, modest home on the edge of town, Sarah didn't have the luxury of expensive beauty treatments or designer clothes. Her mother worked long hours as a waitress, and though she always tried to make ends meet, the struggle was real. There was never enough money for the things Sarah dreamed of, like getting her hair done at a fancy salon or buying clothes from the latest fashion lines. But she had always been content, her mom's love and support making up for what they lacked financially. That was until Sarah reached high school. It was then that she began to feel the sting of being an outsider. The other girls had everything she didn't. They laughed at her frizzy hair, her second-hand clothes, and the fact that she never seemed to have the latest phone. Sarah couldn't help it. She had always been self-conscious. She wanted to fit in, to be like the other girls, to have the confidence that seemed to come so naturally to them. Today, she was determined to make a change. She had saved up for months, working odd jobs, doing her best to collect enough money to have her hair styled professionally. The salon, Chick Couture, was a place she had walked past hundreds of times, staring longingly through the glass windows at the customers who always seemed so flawless. But now she was inside, sitting in the high-backed chair, ready to take the plunge. Her stylist, a woman in her late 30s named Linda, greeted her with a warm smile and a friendly voice. "So, what are we doing today?" she asked, her tone calm and professional. Sarah, feeling the weight of the moment, smiled shyly and nervously explained her vision. She showed Linda a picture from a fashion magazine, a sleek, modern hairstyle she thought would make her feel more confident. Linda nodded, her expert hands running through Sarah's hair with a critical eye. Sarah tried to calm herself. This was a big step, and she couldn't let her nerves ruin it. She could feel the heat from the blow dryer as Linda expertly dried her hair, but it didn't calm her anxious thoughts. What if it didn't turn out like the picture? What if she looked worse? That's when she heard the sound of voices approaching, the unmistakable sound of high school chatter. Sarah stiffened in the chair. She turned her head slightly, her heart sinking as she saw the group of girls entering the salon. It was them, the popular crowd. The girls who always wore the latest trends, whose laughter was heard from across the school hallway. The girls who never seemed to take notice of Sarah, except to laugh when she passed by. And now, they were here. There was Tiffany, the ringleader of the group, with her platinum blonde hair and perfectly applied makeup. She was the one who always seemed to have everything, from the best clothes to the most enviable boyfriend. Behind her were Amy and Jessica, equally beautiful but equally cruel. They always found ways to make Sarah feel invisible. At least, that's how she felt when they were around. Sarah's eyes widened as Tiffany's gaze landed on her. Tiffany, always with a sharp eye for spotting weakness, immediately noticed Sarah sitting in the chair. A slow smirk appeared on Tiffany's lips as she walked over to Sarah, her heels clicking sharply against the salon floor. Sarah could feel her stomach drop. "Look at you," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Did you think you could just waltz in here and look like one of us?" Sarah tried to keep her eyes focused on Linda's hands as she worked, but the words stung. They always did. It was as if Tiffany had a radar for finding Sarah's insecurities, and she zeroed in on them like a hawk. Amy and Jessica joined Tiffany, standing by Sarah's side, their faces plastered with smirks as they observed the situation. Sarah could feel the weight of their judgment, the invisible pressure building in her chest. She had always been an easy target for these girls, someone to make fun of and pick apart. And she hated it. She hated how they made her feel small and insignificant. But today, she had promised herself she wouldn't let them get to her. She would finally stand up for herself. Tiffany continued, her voice laced with cruelty. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure this place will do its best to make you look somewhat decent. But honestly, Sarah, do you really think a haircut can fix all of this? She gestured toward Sarah's entire appearance, from her frizzy hair to her thrift store clothes. Sarah's heart pounded. She could feel the tears welling up behind her eyes, threatening to spill over. But she clenched her fists, determined not to show weakness. She wouldn't let them see how much their words hurt. She wouldn't let them see how small they made her feel. Linda, sensing the tension in the air, stood up straighter and turned toward Tiffany, her voice firm. That's enough. This young woman is here for her appointment, and I won't tolerate anyone making her feel less than she is. If you have something to say, I suggest you do it elsewhere. Tiffany looked taken aback for a moment, her confidence faltering slightly. The other girls fell silent, their eyes shifting between Sarah and Linda. For the briefest of moments, Sarah could almost feel like she had a chance to stand up for herself. But Tiffany recovered quickly, her smirk returning. Whatever, Tiffany muttered, rolling her eyes. It's not like I care what she does. It's just a haircut. She can't hide what she is with a new style. The words stung. They always did. But Sarah held her ground, her face expressionless, her fists clenched tightly in her lap. She wasn't going to let them ruin this for her. She wasn't going to let them take this moment from her. The more Tiffany talked, the more Sarah's determination grew. She had come so far to get here, and she wouldn't let a few cruel words destroy that. Linda stepped between Sarah and the girls, her presence commanding attention. You're free to go, but we're not going to tolerate the kind of behavior in this space. Her voice was calm but assertive, and for a moment, the salon fell into an eerie silence. The other customers looked on, some with sympathetic glances toward Sarah, others unsure what would happen next. Tiffany and her friends exchanged uncomfortable looks, clearly not used to being challenged in this way. After a brief pause, Tiffany huffed, flicked her hair over her shoulder, and turned to leave. Whatever, Linda, it's your salon, but don't say I didn't warn you. As the girls exited the salon, Sarah sat back in the chair, her body shaking slightly from the adrenaline. She had done it. She had stood up for herself, even if it was just a small moment. She hadn't let their words break her. And in that moment, she realized something important. She didn't need to hide anymore. Maybe she wasn't perfect, but she was enough. Linda gave Sarah a reassuring smile, her voice warm as she spoke. You're beautiful just as you are, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Sarah's heart swelled. For the first time in a long while, she believed it. The salon was quieter now, the tension from Tiffany and her friends lingering like an uncomfortable fog. Sarah remained in the chair, her hands still clenched tightly, not quite sure how to feel about the encounter. She was proud of herself for standing up, but the sting of Tiffany's words lingered in her mind. She can't hide what she is with a new style. Those words replayed in her head over and over as Linda continued to work her magic on Sarah's hair. Sarah glanced at her reflection in the mirror. The frizzy mess of hair she had walked in with was slowly transforming under Linda's care, the stylist's deft hands shaping it into something sleek and beautiful. But Sarah wasn't just seeing the change in her hair. She was seeing something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to see in a long time. She saw potential. She saw someone worthy of self-care and self-love. She saw someone who could stand up for herself and not let the world define her worth. Linda noticed Sarah's quiet contemplation. You know, you've got something special, Linda said, breaking the silence. You've got a strength that a lot of people don't have. Don't let those girls make you feel any less than you are." Her voice was soft but firm, as though she had seen this kind of thing before and knew exactly what Sarah needed to hear. Sarah met Linda's eyes through the mirror, her chest tightening. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. Her mom, yes, but not many others. Sarah's peers often dismissed her, ignored her, or outright made her feel invisible. But Linda, a stranger in a way, had seen something in her, something she hadn't seen in herself. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the emotions that threatened to rise to the surface. She wasn't a crier, not anymore. She had learned to keep everything inside, to bury her feelings deep. But something about Linda's words, her kindness, made everything feel different. "I thank you," Sarah said quietly, her voice shaky. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Her voice trailed off, barely above a whisper. Linda gave a soft smile, her hand still working on Sarah's hair. "You belong, Sarah, more than you think. It's the world that needs to catch up to you, not the other way around." For a moment, Sarah felt a shift. A quiet warmth started in her chest, spreading outward, melting away some of the insecurities she had carried for years. She still wasn't sure if she could fully believe it, if she could truly let go of all the hurt and self-doubt. But Linda's words had planted a seed, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the faintest glimmer of hope. As Linda finished styling Sarah's hair, she spun the chair around, and Sarah finally saw the full transformation. Her hair, once unmanageable and frizzy, now cascaded in soft waves, gleaming under the salon lights. She looked different, not just in appearance, but in the way she carried herself. There was a subtle shift in her posture, a change in how she looked at herself. "You look amazing," Linda said, her voice filled with pride. "I hope you can see what I see. You've got that glow, Sarah. Don't ever forget it." Sarah smiled softly, her reflection in the mirror staring back at her. For the first time, she saw herself through someone else's eyes, and it was a beautiful sight. It wasn't just the physical change that mattered, but the internal one. Linda had helped her rediscover something that had been buried under years of self-doubt. The girl she saw in the mirror wasn't perfect, but she was strong. She was worthy. But as Sarah got out of the chair and reached for her purse, she felt a familiar unease settle in her stomach. The reality of walking out of this salon, this safe space where she had felt empowered, was setting in. The world outside the salon doors was harsh, and while her hair might be fabulous, she knew that wouldn't stop people from whispering or judging her. The change she had undergone today wasn't just physical, it was internal, but it still felt fragile. Linda seemed to sense Sarah's hesitation. She stopped her as she was about to leave. "I want you to do something for me, okay? When you walk out of here, hold your head up high. I don't care what anyone says or does. You are worthy of every bit of kindness and respect, including your own. Don't forget that." Sarah looked at Linda, her eyes welling up again, but this time, it wasn't from sadness. It was from gratitude. "I won't forget. Thank you." She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Linda in a quick, heartfelt hug. Linda squeezed her tightly, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt safe. She felt seen. As she stepped out into the bright sunlight, Sarah took a deep breath. The world outside was bustling, noisy, and filled with people going about their day, but she felt different, stronger. Maybe she wasn't quite ready to conquer the world, but she was ready to start standing up for herself. The fear of judgment, the cruel words, the sneers, they didn't have as much power over her as they once did. Maybe she wasn't the popular girl or the one everyone admired, but she was Sarah, and that was enough. But as she walked through the bustling downtown area, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, half expecting to see a message from her mom or a reminder about homework. Instead, the notification was from her school's social media page. It was a post featuring a picture from earlier that day, one of Tiffany and her friends. The caption read, "When you're too good for the rejects in school, Hashtag sorry not sorry. Sarah's heart sank. She could feel the sting of the words, even though she had heard them 100 times before. Her phone felt heavier in her hand, as though it had become a tangible reminder of the cruelty that still existed in the world. She wanted to cry. She wanted to hide. But Linda's voice echoed in her mind. You are worthy. Taking a deep breath, Sarah tapped the screen, leaving a comment on the post. It was short, simple, but powerful. I don't need your approval. I've got mine. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of pride. She wasn't going to let them define her anymore. She wasn't going to hide. As she walked down the sidewalk, Sarah's steps felt a little lighter, a little braver. The sting of the post was still there, but it didn't have the same power over her as it once did. She had stood up to the girls at the salon, and now she had stood up to them again, in a way that felt empowering. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but it was a step toward reclaiming her own worth. Later that night, Sarah sat in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the softness of it, the smoothness. She didn't look at it as a flaw anymore. She didn't look at herself as flawed. For the first time in ages, she felt proud of who she was. Maybe she wasn't perfect, but that was okay. She was enough. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from her mom. How's the new hair? I bet you look gorgeous. Sarah smiled as she typed back. I feel gorgeous. And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. The days after Sarah's salon visit passed slowly, like a slow unfolding of a story she had never quite been part of. There were moments when she would catch herself looking in the mirror, seeing her newly styled hair and recalling Linda's words, "You are worthy." But there were other moments, too. Moments when she felt the weight of her old insecurities creeping back in, threatening to undo everything. High school was never easy. The girls who had tormented her, like Tiffany and her friends, still made their presence known, their cruel remarks and sharp laughter a constant reminder of her outsider status. But something had changed in Sarah. She no longer felt as small in their presence. Her confidence, though fragile, had been emboldened by the kindness of a stranger, by Linda's encouragement, and by the small victory of standing up for herself in the salon. It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about fitting into some ideal mold of beauty or popularity. For the first time, Sarah realized it was about being comfortable in her own skin, accepting herself for who she was, flaws and all. The struggle within. It was Thursday afternoon, and Sarah was sitting in the cafeteria, staring at her lunch tray. The usual hustle and bustle of the cafeteria was louder than ever, filled with chatter and laughter, but to Sarah, it all felt distant. She was sitting at the back of the room, as usual, a place where she felt safe, unnoticed. She had always preferred it that way, quiet, out of the spotlight. Today, however, something was different. She had noticed a few glances, a few whispers. It wasn't unusual for the popular girls to comment on her, but today felt different. It was as if the world around her was adjusting to her newfound confidence. She wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing. "Hey, Sarah," a voice suddenly called from behind her. Sarah turned to see her friend, Mia, standing beside her, holding a tray of food. Mia was one of the few people who had never made Sarah feel small. She was kind, smart, and had a quiet strength that Sarah admired. Mia sat down across from her, offering her a warm smile. "You've been kind of quiet lately. How's the new hair?" Maya asked. Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. She hadn't told anyone about the salon visit except her mom. She hadn't felt ready to open up, to let anyone know how much that day had meant to her. It felt like something sacred, a moment of self-rediscovery that she wanted to keep to herself for a little while longer. But Mia was her friend. She could trust her. "I got my hair done at a salon last weekend," Sarah said, her voice a little hesitant. "Linda, the stylist, really helped me. I've been thinking a lot about how I let people define me before, how I used to care so much about what others thought." Mia raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Sarah started, shifting in her seat. "I used to always feel like I had to fit in, to be like everyone else. But I think I'm starting to realize that's not who I am. That's not what I want to be." Mia smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "That's awesome, Sarah. I've always known you had this incredible strength. But I get it. It's hard to stop caring about what others think, especially in high school. But you've got to trust that you're enough, just the way you are." Sarah nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. It was hard to put into words the way Mia's simple support made her feel, like someone saw her for the person she was, not the person she was pretending to be. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was allowed to just be herself. "Thanks, Mia. I really needed to hear that." Confronting the past. The next day, during lunch, Sarah found herself once again sitting at her usual spot, away from the loud crowds. The whispers, the stares, they didn't seem as noticeable today. Sarah had learned to hold her head up high, to walk with a quiet confidence, but even though she felt more at ease with herself, there was still the lingering feeling that her past, those painful years of rejection and isolation, was never too far behind. She was lost in her thoughts when she felt someone's presence next to her. She looked up to see Tiffany standing there, a smug smile plastered across her face. For a second, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was this going to be another one of those moments? Would Tiffany start the cruel remarks again, as she had so many times before? But today, Sarah was different. She wasn't going to let Tiffany's words shake her. Not anymore. She had learned that the most powerful thing she could do was not give those words any weight. Tiffany crossed her arms, leaning casually against the table. "Well, look at you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I see the salon did wonders for you. You actually look halfway decent now." Sarah took a deep breath, resisting the urge to retreat. She looked Tiffany in the eye, holding her ground. "You know, Tiffany, I've realized something. I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone's approval. I'm not here to fit into your idea of what's acceptable. I'm just here to live my life. And I'm done letting people like you make me feel bad about myself." Tiffany's smug expression faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered, giving a half-hearted laugh. "Oh, please. You think you can just change overnight? You'll never be one of us." Sarah's chest tightened, but she refused to back down. She had come too far to let these old wounds reopen. "No, Tiffany," Sarah said firmly, her voice steady. "I don't want to be one of you. I just want to be myself. And that's enough. That's more than enough." Tiffany didn't have a retort. She just looked at Sarah for a long moment, her expression shifting between confusion and irritation. Then, with a dramatic roll of her eyes, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. For a moment, Sarah sat there, breathing deeply. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had stood up to Tiffany, not with anger, not with fear, but with strength. She had taken her power back, and Tiffany's cruel words no longer had the power to break her. A growing strength. That afternoon, Sarah walked home from school with a lighter heart than usual. She had felt something shift within her, not just because she had confronted Tiffany, but because she had learned to confront the parts of herself that had held her back for so long. She had spent years hiding behind her insecurities, afraid of being judged or rejected. But now, for the first time, she was choosing to embrace who she was, flaws and all. As Sarah reached her house, she found her mom sitting on the front porch, reading a book. Her mom looked up with a smile as Sarah approached. "How was your day?" she asked, setting the book aside. Sarah hesitated for a moment, considering the events of the day, the confrontation with Tiffany, the quiet moments with Mia, and the feeling of self-assurance that had continued to grow inside her. "It was good, Mom," Sarah said, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "It was really good." Reflection and hope. Later that night, after her mom had gone to bed, Sarah sat on her bed, her journal open in front of her. She had always kept a journal, though she rarely shared her thoughts with anyone. But tonight, the words came easily. I've learned something important today, that I don't need anyone's approval to be happy. I don't need to hide anymore. I can be who I am and still be worthy of love, kindness, and respect. I've got a long way to go, but I'm getting there. I'm stronger than I thought. Sarah closed the journal, her heart full of hope. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of what the future held. She was ready to face it, one step at a time. It had been a few weeks since Sarah's conversation with Tiffany in the cafeteria, and things had changed. They hadn't changed overnight, of course. Life never works like that. But Sarah had started to notice the subtle shifts within herself. Her confidence, while still fragile at times, had taken root in ways that she hadn't expected. She wasn't the same girl she was when she first walked into that salon, unsure and hesitant. She was stronger now, more aware of her worth, and that made all the difference. But with that growth came new challenges. The world outside wasn't going to change just because Sarah had found some peace within herself. The people who once made her feel small still roamed the halls of her high school, their judgment and cruel words lingering in the background like an unwelcome shadow. But Sarah wasn't the same girl anymore, and this time, she wasn't backing down. Facing old fears, it was another ordinary school morning, and Sarah was heading to her locker when she noticed a group of girls huddled together, giggling and pointing. Her first instinct was to turn and walk the other way. She had learned to avoid situations like this, but something held her in place, something stronger than the fear that had always led her to hide. She stood still, breathing deeply, trying to steady her nerves. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw Tiffany's unmistakable figure heading in her direction. This time, though, Sarah didn't feel the rush of anxiety that usually accompanied Tiffany's presence. Instead, she felt calm, strong. She turned to face her with a steady gaze, something she never would have been able to do before. Tiffany stopped in front of Sarah, her usual smirk in place. "So I see you're still trying to pull off that new look," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You know it's cute, but you still don't fit in with us. You never will." For a split second, Sarah's stomach churned. Those words, the ones that had always hurt the most, echoed in her mind. But she quickly reminded herself of how far she had come. She remembered Linda's words from the salon, "You are worthy." And with that reminder, Sarah straightened her shoulders, holding her ground. "You're right," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "I don't fit in with you, and that's okay. I'm not trying to be like you anymore. I'm trying to be myself, and that's enough." Tiffany's eyes narrowed, clearly unprepared for Sarah's response. There was a brief moment of silence before Tiffany's expression hardened. "Whatever," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "Don't get too cocky. You'll never be one of us." As Tiffany walked away, Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. For once, she didn't feel the need to shrink back. She didn't need Tiffany's approval, and she certainly didn't need to change herself to fit in with anyone else. Sarah had realized that her worth wasn't defined by the people who had once tried to tear her down. She was her own person, with her own strength. The ripple effect. Later that day, Sarah found herself in the library, trying to focus on her homework. But her mind kept drifting back to the encounter with Tiffany. She had stood up for herself, and it felt good. Better than she had ever imagined. She still didn't know what had shifted inside her, but something about that conversation had freed her in a way that nothing else had. She was pulled from her thoughts when she heard someone approach. It was Mia, smiling as she walked toward Sarah's table. "You've been on fire lately," Maya said with a grin, sitting down across from her. "I heard about your little showdown with Tiffany this morning. That's amazing." Sarah chuckled softly, feeling the familiar warmth of her friend's support. "I didn't even think it would come out like that," she admitted. "I was just tired of being afraid of her. And when she said that I'd never fit in, I just realized that's exactly the point. I don't want to fit in with them anymore." Mia nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "You've really come a long way, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. You're so much stronger than you give yourself credit for." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude. Mia had always been there for her, offering kindness and support when Sarah needed it most. She had never judged her or made her feel like she wasn't enough. And now, with Mia's encouragement, Sarah was beginning to see just how much she had grown. A moment of reflection. That night, as Sarah sat on her bed, she found herself reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few weeks. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. She had gone from a girl who constantly doubted herself and sought approval from others to someone who was beginning to stand firm in her own identity. But there were still moments when doubt crept in. There were still days when Sarah felt the weight of her past insecurities pressing on her chest, threatening to pull her back into the darkness. She wasn't perfect, and she knew that. She still had a long way to go on this journey of self-acceptance. But for the first time, Sarah felt like she was moving in the right direction. She picked up her journal, flipping to a blank page. Writing had always been a way for her to sort through her thoughts, to process the emotions she didn't always know how to express. She began to write, the words flowing easily onto the page. "Today was a good day. I stood up to Tiffany, and I didn't back down. I didn't shrink or apologize for who I am. For the first time, I realized that I don't need to fit into anyone else's mold. I'm enough, just as I am. There will still be hard days ahead, I know that, but I've come a long way. I'm proud of who I'm becoming." She paused, reflecting on those words. They weren't easy to write, but they felt important. She had spent so many years trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for her. She had let other people's opinions define her worth. But now she was learning to define her own value, and that made all the difference. The power of self-compassion. The next few weeks were a journey of small victories and quiet moments of self-realization. Sarah continued to grow more comfortable in her own skin. She started to take more risks, things she had never dared to do before. She began speaking up in class, offering her opinions and ideas without fear of judgment. She even joined a club she had always been interested in, one focused on art and self-expression, something she had always loved but never had the courage to pursue. Sarah's relationships with her classmates began to shift too. People who had once ignored her or made her feel invisible started to take notice. Some of them even started to open up to her, apologizing for past behavior, though Sarah didn't expect that. She didn't need their apologies to know her worth. But it wasn't just about the people around her. It was about how Sarah had learned to treat herself. She no longer criticized herself for every little mistake, no longer feared the things she couldn't control. She had learned to be kind to herself, to acknowledge her imperfections without letting them define her. One afternoon, after a long day at school, Sarah sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over the horizon. She felt a quiet peace settle over her. The journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt ready for whatever came her way. She wasn't perfect, but she was enough. A new chapter. A few weeks later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror once again, her hair styled just the way she liked it. But this time, she wasn't just admiring the outside. She was admiring the girl looking back at her, the girl who had fought hard to rediscover her strength, the girl who had learned to embrace her flaws and imperfections, the girl who had finally realized that she was worthy of love and respect, no matter what anyone else said. She smiled at her reflection, her heart full of gratitude. This wasn't just about hair or looks. It was about everything she had learned about herself. It was about the strength that had always been inside her, waiting to be uncovered. For the first time, Sarah was ready to step into the world unapologetically. She was ready to embrace her true self and let her light shine, no matter who stood in her way. And that, she realized, was the greatest transformation of all. Months had passed since that pivotal moment in the salon, and Sarah had come a long way. Her confidence wasn't perfect, but it was growing every day. She had learned that life wasn't about eliminating all doubts and insecurities. It was about understanding and managing them, while still moving forward. As time went on, Sarah found herself looking at the world differently. What once seemed impossible now seemed within reach. Her high school years had always felt like a never-ending struggle for approval, an uphill battle against forces that tried to tell her she wasn't enough. But now, those struggles had taken on a new meaning. They weren't signs of weakness. They were lessons. Each moment of doubt, each judgment she'd faced, had shaped her into someone more resilient. Someone who could walk into any room with her head held high, not because she was invincible, but because she had learned to face her vulnerabilities head-on. A new challenge. It was the beginning of spring, and the school year was coming to a close. Sarah had spent most of the semester focusing on her academics and her personal growth. Her relationship with Mia had strengthened, and they spent more time together outside of school, talking about everything from their dreams for the future to their shared love of art. It was a comfortable friendship, one that didn't demand anything from Sarah other than her true self. But as spring break approached, Sarah's world was shaken once again. The annual school talent show was just around the corner, and Sarah had been hearing whispers about who was going to perform. This wasn't something that had ever interested her before. She had always thought of it as something for the outgoing popular crowd. The same girls who once laughed at her behind her back. The same girls who had made her feel less than. But this year, something shifted inside her. A small, quiet voice told her it was time to stop hiding. The idea of performing was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. Sarah had always loved to sing, but she had never dared to share that part of herself with anyone. She was terrified of what people would think, of being judged, of exposing her vulnerability in front of a crowd. But that fear, once so all-consuming, no longer held the same weight. She had learned that fear was something to be confronted, not avoided. One evening, after a long day at school, Sarah sat down with her guitar. She hadn't played much lately, but something about the quiet of her room inspired her to pick it up. She began strumming gently, her fingers finding the familiar chords. Slowly, she began to hum a tune, something she had written years ago, but never had the courage to share. It was a song about the struggle to find one's voice, about feeling invisible, and about the journey of learning to stand up and be seen. As the words came to her, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm. It was as if the song was her way of communicating with herself, of reminding herself how far she had come. When she finished, she sat quietly for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the strings. Her heart was pounding, but this time it wasn't fear, it was excitement. For the first time in a long time, she realized that the one thing she had been running from, vulnerability, was also the very thing that would set her free. Taking the leap. The next day at school, Sarah walked into the lunchroom with a sense of purpose. She spotted Mia sitting at their usual table, her notebook open and her pen scribbling across the pages. Sarah hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Mia, I've been thinking about something," she began, her voice a little unsure. Mia looked up from her notebook, her expression curious. "What's up?" "I'm thinking about auditioning for the talent show," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia's face broke into a wide smile. "That's amazing, Sarah. You should totally go for it. What are you going to perform?" "I don't know yet," Sarah replied, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I've been writing this song, and I think I want to sing it, but I'm not sure if I can." Mia leaned forward, her eyes filled with encouragement. "You can do it. You've come so far already, and you've got an incredible voice. I know you're scared, but I believe in you. You should do it for you, not for anyone else." Sarah felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. Mia's support meant the world to her. She had always been there, cheering her on from the sidelines, never once doubting Sarah's abilities. And in that moment, Sarah realized that Mia wasn't the only one who believed in her. She had started to believe in herself. That evening, Sarah signed up for the talent show audition. Her heart was pounding as she handed in the form, but there was also a sense of liberation. She didn't know if she would make it onto the stage, but the act of signing up was a victory in itself. It was a step toward something bigger, a step toward truly embracing herself, flaws and all. Facing the stage. The day of the talent show auditions arrived with all the usual nerves and excitement. Sarah could feel her stomach doing flips as she walked into the auditorium. The sound of people warming up and rehearsing filled the air, and the sight of students running through their acts made Sarah's heart race. She was one of the last to audition, which gave her plenty of time to second-guess herself, to wonder if she had made a huge mistake. She had already played through the song in her room countless times, but now that she was here, in front of everyone, it felt different. Her palms were sweating, and her breath was shallow as she waited for her turn. But then, she remembered something. Her mom's words from when she was younger. "You'll never know what you're capable of until you try." It was the same message she had heard from Linda in the salon, from Mia in the cafeteria, and from herself in the mirror. This wasn't about being perfect. This wasn't about winning. This was about doing something for herself, for the girl who had spent so long hiding away. When it was finally her turn, Sarah stepped onto the stage, guitar in hand. She looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some strangers, and felt her nerves rise up again. But she took a deep breath, remembering the strength she had found within herself. She adjusted the mic stand, closed her eyes for a moment, and strummed the first few chords. As the music began, Sarah found herself losing the fear. The room faded into the background as she sang, her voice clear and steady, carrying the words she had written from the depths of her heart. It was a song about strength, about embracing who she was, and about finding the courage to stand tall, even when the world tried to knock her down. For the first time, she wasn't singing to hide. She wasn't singing to seek approval. She was singing to express herself. And that was enough. When the final chord echoed through the auditorium, Sarah opened her eyes to see the room still. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, applause began to fill the air. It wasn't loud or thunderous, but it was enough. Enough to remind Sarah that she had done something incredible. A new chapter begins. Sarah didn't win the talent show. She didn't even come close. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she had taken the leap. She had stepped out of her comfort zone and done something she had once thought impossible. She had embraced vulnerability, and in doing so, she had unlocked a strength she never knew she had. The next few weeks were filled with small, quiet victories. She continued to sing, to write, to share her voice. She made new friends, deepened her bond with Mia, and continued to face the world with a sense of peace that came from knowing she was enough, just as she was. And as the school year drew to a close, Sarah stood at the edge of a new chapter. She had learned that her worth wasn't something to be earned. It was inherent in who she was. It was something she had carried with her all along, even when she hadn't known it. For the first time, Sarah felt ready to step into the future, not as the girl she had once been, but as the woman she was becoming. A woman who no longer needed to hide. A woman who could stand tall in the face of adversity, not because she was perfect, but because she had learned to embrace her flaws and her strengths equally. She smiled at her reflection, knowing that the journey wasn't over, but that she was no longer afraid of the road ahead. The summer after Sarah's talent show performance was one of reflection and transformation. It wasn't a sudden, magical shift. It wasn't like a light bulb moment that changed everything. Instead, it was more like a gentle unfolding, like a flower slowly blooming in the warmth of the sun. The summer months allowed Sarah to bask in the freedom of her self-discovery. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, she felt prepared to face them head-on. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself more comfortable in her own skin. She no longer second-guessed her decisions, nor did she hide behind the walls of insecurity that had once dominated her life. There was still the occasional moment of doubt, when the old fears crept back in, or when the weight of the world felt a little too heavy. But Sarah had learned how to stand up to those fears, how to confront them and walk through them rather than retreating. She spent her summer working part-time, at a local bookstore. It was a peaceful job, quiet, filled with the rustle of pages and the soft murmurs of customers browsing the aisles. Sarah loved the atmosphere of the store. There was something calming about the scent of books and the way each shelf held new worlds to be explored. The job allowed her to continue her growth in a different way. She learned about patience, how to interact with different people, and how to navigate the world with a sense of calm that came from knowing she was no longer defined by the opinions of others. A new challenge arises. It wasn't until the end of summer, when Sarah was preparing for her senior year of high school, that another challenge presented itself. It was the kind of challenge Sarah had always feared, something that made her feel vulnerable, exposed, and unsure of herself. But it was a challenge that, deep down, she knew she couldn't avoid. One evening, as she was flipping through a magazine at the bookstore, her phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Mia, hey, I need to talk to you about something." Sarah paused, her finger hovering over the screen, wondering what it was. It wasn't unusual for Mia to text, but there was something about the tone of the message that made her curious. She quickly typed a response. "Sarah, what's up?" "Mia, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I think it's time I told you something that I've been keeping from you." The sudden shift in tone caught Sarah off guard. She felt a small flutter of worry in her chest. Was everything okay with Mia? "Sarah, of course, what's going on?" Mia's reply came almost immediately. "Mia, I'm applying to college in a few months, and I want to go out of state. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I feel like it's time for me to take the leap. But I'm scared. I don't know how you'll feel about it." Sarah's heart dropped. She had always assumed that Maya would stay nearby after high school, just like they had always talked about. The thought of Mia leaving was something Sarah hadn't truly considered. She knew it was a natural step for Mia to take, but that didn't make the idea any easier to accept. She stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sarah had always been afraid of change. The idea of being separated from Mia, the one person who had always supported her through thick and thin, was a reality she wasn't sure she was ready for. Finally, she typed out her response. "Sarah, I think you should do what makes you happiest. I'll miss you, but I know you're ready for this. We'll figure it out." Her response felt honest, but her heart still ached. She had spent so much of her life attached to people and places that were familiar. The idea of change, of losing something that felt like a constant, terrified her. But Mia was right. She had to embrace the change, just as she had embraced her own transformation over the last year. It wasn't about holding on to the past, it was about growing with it. Sarah knew that. Letting go. The next few weeks were filled with the slow process of letting go, both of her old self and the fears she had of losing Mia. The two of them spent as much time together as possible before Mia left for college. They went to the movies, spent afternoons at the bookstore, and even went on a small road trip just to experience one last adventure together. Sarah didn't voice her worries aloud, but she felt them. The idea of being alone, of not having Mia nearby to lean on, was a challenge she didn't know how to face. But every time Sarah started to feel anxious, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She had once been paralyzed by the fear of being alone, the fear of change. But now she was embracing both. She wasn't the same person who had walked into high school 4 years ago. She had learned that change was a necessary part of growth, and she had seen firsthand that it was possible to face it and come out stronger. Mia's departure came faster than Sarah anticipated. The day Mia left for college, Sarah stood outside her house, hugging her tightly. "I'll miss you so much," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll miss you too, but you got this," Mia replied, her voice filled with both sadness and encouragement. "You're stronger than you think, and you'll always have me, no matter where I am." As Mia drove off to her new life, Sarah stood there for a long moment, watching the car disappear down the street. It was a quiet farewell, one that left Sarah with a sense of both loss and anticipation. Mia was stepping into her future, and Sarah was stepping into her own. The two of them would always be connected, but they were also two separate individuals, each on their own path. Finding new strength. Senior year was a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges. Sarah found herself facing new academic pressures, navigating the complexities of friendships, and continuing to explore her own identity. But this year, she was no longer burdened by self-doubt. She no longer feared judgment or rejection. She had learned to trust herself, to take risks, and to embrace who she was, even when things were uncertain. One of the most unexpected moments came during a career day event at school. Sarah had always been uncertain about her future, what path she should take, what career she should pursue. But when she attended the event, something clicked. She listened to the guest speakers, each talking about their journeys and the passions that had driven them. And then, without even realizing it, Sarah found herself talking to one of the speakers, a local musician who had turned her love of music into a career. The conversation was brief, but it was enough to ignite something inside Sarah. Music had always been her passion, but it had also always been something she kept hidden, something she had never fully embraced. The idea of pursuing it as a career had seemed like a far-off dream, something too risky to even consider. But the musician's words lingered with her. "Don't wait for the perfect moment," the speaker had said. "Create your own path. The world won't always give you the opportunity, but you can make it for yourself." That night, Sarah sat down with her guitar, strumming the familiar chords. For the first time, she felt the spark of possibility. She wasn't sure where this path would take her, but she knew one thing: she was ready to pursue it. She had spent so long hiding from the things that scared her, but now she was ready to face them head-on. Embracing the future. As Sarah stood on the cusp of graduation, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She wasn't the same person who had walked into high school 4 years ago, shy, insecure, and unsure of herself. She had transformed, not because she had achieved some ideal standard of success, but because she had learned to embrace her journey, flaws and all. She had learned to trust herself and her path, no matter how uncertain it seemed. And now, as she prepared for the next chapter, whether that meant college, music, or something entirely different, she knew she had the strength to face whatever came her way. The road ahead was still filled with uncertainty, but Sarah had learned to find comfort in that. She didn't need to have all the answers right now. All she needed was the courage to keep moving forward. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Sarah smiled to herself. This was just the beginning. She had come so far, and she was only getting started.